Love is the most primal of human needs. It is the source, the why we do what we do every day. Today on FIT TV, our topic will explore the soul and the source of love and how we can keep it. FIT believes where love is strong, there will be less divorce. But when divorce is imminent, learning to love can also keep us from making things much, much worse. I have with me to discuss this topic Daniel Gilman is a pastor and author, and the website is www.learntolove.com. You'll see it on the crawl. Here's a copy of his book. And it's a very interesting topic because I believe that that's something that's missing in our society, is understanding what love is all about. Purpose of your book, sir, could you tell me about that?
The purpose of the book, first of all, thank you for having me on your show, and hi, Mom. It's the first time I've been on TV. So the purpose of the book is to try to turn people's hearts and minds back to the original intent and the original design of love as God designed it in the Bible. What we do as a culture is, I learned to love from my parents, right? You learn to love from your parents. They learn to love from their parents, right? So we basically have this generation to generation kind of watering down of what love should be and could be. So my purpose of the book is to try to point people back to the original source of love and the best known method of love, so that if we all use that, our lives would be better, more richer, our relationships would be better.
And the original source of love is God's love.
Right.
That's what God teaches you. Okay. That's the primary focus of the book. When did you become serious about your faith and about your interest in this area?
I became serious about my faith right about the time I had my second son. So I had my first son. He was a couple years old. I was a young dad. I was in my early 20s. And about the second time I had to hold my second son as a baby, I looked down and said, I'm responsible for these lives. I'm responsible for setting the tone and building a legacy with these kids. And I just, I always believed in God, and I just thought, if I believe in God, I really ought to study and know and be able to define to myself what I believe and be able to teach it to my kids so that they would grow in God's love.
What are some of the broader topics that you have laid out in the book that you can describe to the audience? Some of the broader, topically, how would you describe the book?
One of the main topics is seeing through the lens of God, I call it. One of the chapters is seeing through the lens, and basically what that means is looking at life and looking at God, and more importantly, looking at fellow people as the way God sees them. I define in the book the three major purposes of a lens, right? One is to bring things into an acute focus, right? The second is to actually, anything that we don't want in focus, we can eliminate by having one acute focal plane, and then everything else that we don't want is outside of the focus and outside of our minds and hearts, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then the third is magnification, right? Like I mentioned in the book about frying ants with a magnifying glass, which sounds kind of morbid, but
yeah, it's a horrible thought.
Yeah, it is. But so the point is, if we take God's love and put God first in our lives, and we look at that as slipping His lens in front of our hearts, it will focus in on what God thinks is right and wrong, and what God thinks is good and wholesome and productive for humanity. It will filter out the darker things that our culture has become not only accustomed to and apathetic to, but even somewhat addicted to.
So, some of the, if you look at politics close enough, you'll see that there is a sector of a secular voice that over the years, predominantly on the political left of things, has brought itself to diminish or reduce religious entities in so many different ways, about church and about God and about removing that particular plane. Being that my opinion, most wars have been fought over religion and things that are like that. I can't see why that would happen. This would be a new, novel way to approach bringing back God, I think, by learning about the love in the initial phase of what it is that the initial desire of what God is love, and bring that back might be a good idea to diminish some of that thrust that's going on nationally in politics.
Yeah, I agree. You don't have to be a Christian or overly religious to follow the tenets of the Bible as far as how God defines love. To be patient, to be kind, to honor your spouse, to be obedient to your parents as children, to look out for your neighbors, and try to become an important and productive part of community. These are things that the Bible teaches that the judicial law doesn't necessarily promote all the time or even enforce in times of need.
A lot of what we see in politics stems from what you talked about before, about the law itself having not necessarily the best intentions, is somewhat nefarious. One of your quotes you gave me is that love is based on sacrifice and law is based on sin. I've always felt that if you followed law, that there would be a lack of servitude, and there would be a only servitude. It wouldn't be servitude toward God, it'd be servitude toward an existing law, which most of which is fear-based, and that's not God's love delivering fear.
No. God's love is about sacrifice. Fear drives selflessness or self-centeredness out of basic survival mechanisms of the human nature. Self-centeredness will promote selfishness, and then selfishness will go on to promote greed and arrogance.
I mean, we can see exactly what you're talking about when you're talking about couples who are heading towards divorce. They tend to get an attorney and protect their own interests. This is something I see, and I see the connection. Very curious about the lack of that awareness in our systems, in our legal system. There isn't any drive towards a reparation or heal or expression of love and sacrifice. None of this is available. It's about how can you attack. It's the opposite.
Right. And in my opinion, it's at the fundamental level, our laws aren't necessarily concerned with morality. Right? They're more concerned with property and a lot of it's basic economics.
Gain, financial gain, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Right.
There's an arrogance towards how I feel law is, especially when it comes to families. Like a family responding to a divorce court doesn't have love at its center. It has protect at its center. How can I avoid the pain, or let me provide pain? It's actually a two-way street. Mm-hmm. If you can stop your significant other, your future ex from acquiring that which you have, is a design of some sort coming out of the system. It has nothing to do with sacrifice. It has nothing to do with love. It has nothing to do with any of those things.
No, it goes back to the self-centeredness and the selfishness.
Right.
When we're focused on what we want, what we can get, and what we want to hold on to at all costs, then that's where love is boxed out and fear is allowed to grow in our hearts to the point where immorality just basically takes over our life at a fundamental
immorality?
level.
Did you say immorality takes over your life?
Well, I should say the lack of morals.
Okay.
So, I don't want to kind of mislead, but basically I think, God promotes deep morals out of self-sacrifice. God asks me to put you first before myself, right? So, and especially when
you won't see that in any court of law.
No, not that I've seen anyway.
Judicial law that a child should obey his parents. I thought that was interesting as a portion of your book. I thought growing up that that's something I had to do. I had to obey my parents. If you'll notice in the last, especially the last 10 to 15 years, but going back a little bit further than that, there's been a break between the communication between children, especially teens, and the parents. There's been a lack of balance. Much of it is because there's no custody sharing. There's not enough love to maintain, even in a difficult relationship, the parenting duel that's necessary to keep children's love together with theirs.
Right. Are you talking specific to divorced or separated families?
Yeah, and also families that are in conflict. They don't even have to be divorced. They could be married together in conflict, referring to mostly to what I see as a fundamental reality that children seem to be disassociated from the love and care and attachment to the parents because they're not obeying the parents like they used to, is what I was referring to.
Right.
There's been a change in the culture.
Right.
Which is what my show is about. It's about a culture of divorce and all those things. That's why I was so interested in your topic.
Yeah, it's, and there again, you have, like you said, it started, maybe 20, 30 years ago, but we've moved from a service-oriented culture to a self-esteem and self-centered culture.
Exactly.
And when the children feel that, right, through education, through the culture that they live in, and through problematic families where it's I'll admit it's very difficult to respect a parent if the parent's an alcoholic or the parent's abusive. But God calls us to work through those problems and follow His lead, so that we as a family can get out of it.
We have a tendency to think that there's families in divorce tend to think that the system, the judges, and have the morality, which is not the case in any way, shape, or form.
Right. I mean, if you look at the system, right, the Constitution, the oath of the judges and the oath of the councils, and it all points back to the Constitution of the United States, and then the Constitution to whatever state they represent, right? But if you read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, neither of those define right or wrong. Neither of them do. So if they point to that, but they don't have
it should be definable in some fashion?
Well, in my opinion, that's where I would point to the Bible, right? Because even if I'm not going to buy into the Bible from a religious point of view, say I want to be, I don't want to ascribe to any religion, but I want to know the best known way to function, to love my neighbor, love my mom, love my wife, my children, take care of them. I mean, the Bible really has the best known methods for how to function in a society. And that's the moral anchor that I think the judicial system and the council are all supposed to be founded on. Right. And the problem is, they're not. The problem is, the assumption is, when they become a judge or when they become a lawyer, that they already have a moral anchor to them, but obviously that's not always the case.
Yeah, you say in your part of your book that divorce court decisions are never decided by a jury, which is definitely, I would agree, and I certainly would far prefer a jury of, my numbers would increase in terms of my fairness scale. The barometer would increase.
Right.
The chances of a balanced approach to a family, either in dispute or in divorce, to get custody, for instance, to exchange access, all these things, Planned Parenthood, all that would work better if we had a moral base to this, but we can't get that out of the legal system.
Correct. I mean, the Bill of Rights, Article 9, I think it is, that deals with the common law, is the closest thing you have to something really specific down at the family level and the community level. And it basically just says, hey, if the dispute is over $20 or more, then it should be handled with a jury, and obviously that's not in divorce, right? I mean, I've never seen anything to do with divorce handed over to a jury, unless the wife kills the husband or the husband kills.
I think
the
it has to be criminal first, but I'm not sure about that.
So divorce is a very ugly thing, and of course, God doesn't want divorce.
Let's say, as a person who's not a Bible reader, and not somebody who would go to a book to discover God, and that person wants to have a better life and can't do that, would you advise to find a moral code of some kind to help repair anything that they may have going bad in their family, or would you just say, read my book, or read the Bible, and what would you're leading them towards?
I mean, ultimately, I would
view of
point
God.
towards the Bible, right? Because I believe that the Bible, if everybody used that as their moral compass, then we'd all have the same versions of right and wrong. It wouldn't be relative.
Have you noticed watching any television that that's the language that they use, the moral compass language? Where is this moral compass? I mean, they're dealing with people in and out of court. People who are doing dangerous and very bad things to other people, and they use the term moral compass. But nobody ever says that the moral compass. Right, exactly.
Right, and that's the problem. See, the Bible basically promotes an absolute truth, an absolute right and wrong. And I understand it's difficult for some people to buy into that, or to buy into the thought of an authority figure.
But you can't give up on your approach. If you have a strong belief system, you can't give up on that.
Right, but my point is that even if you want to reject God, you still need the moral compass. You still need
yes.
something to point out and say, this is right, this is wrong, this is the line between those two. But basically, our culture of relativism blurs that line.
That's right, exactly.
And causes.
No, it's very well said. That's our problem.
Right, it causes a lot of grief, and it makes a lot of lawyers a lot of money.
You say we reject relativism and accept an absolute right and wrong. You're speaking about things that aren't necessarily godlike. We accept right and wrong. There's an acceptance of right and wrong, or did I misread that?
No. So basically, as a Christian, I reject relativism and accept God's absolute truth. And this is where it gets tough as a Christian. We basically have to say, is God right or am I right? Do I, the way I feel about something, should I make my own laws because I feel a certain way about it? And we could name all different kinds of social issues today that cause a lot of grief and a lot of commotion.
I think we're going to try right now to run some things by you. I want you to comment on each one of these things. I believe that the secret to your book is written in this next little passage, okay? So just respond to each one of these things. When you say it teaches, you must be talking about love, right? Love from God, God's love out of the Bible. It teaches all people how to live honestly, with integrity, humility, and charity. I'm sorry. So
Right.
it teaches that.
Right. The Bible. And what I'm going to say is, instead of saying the Bible, I'm just going to say God, because
Okay.
it's God's word.
Okay.
God teaches us to live with honesty and integrity and humility and charity. And basically, if I care more about you and I care more about other people, then I'm going to act on that, right? If I care about myself, then that's just going to bring in fear. I'm just going to be afraid of other people, and I'm not going to help anybody else.
Right.
And God wants us to be there for each other.
That was good. Okay, it also teaches husbands to honor and cherish their wives above themselves. Very,
Right.
very critical.
Very critical.
When it comes to relationships
Right.
and whether they can sustain issues outside of.
Right,
the
absolutely.
outside
I mean,
world.
the husband is appointed by God to be the spiritual head of the household, but I think a lot of people, and maybe some feminists, view that as the husband's taking over or thinks he's superior over the wife, and that is not what the Bible teaches at all. The Bible teaches that we are to honor and respect our wives to a degree at least as much as we do ourselves, and typically more.
Look how badly the feminist movement, which I was a part of when I was in college, distorted that issue, about equality. Look how far it's taken it. You can't be equal. There's no such thing as exact equality.
Right.
We're men and they're women, and there's a difference, and that's the way it is.
And there is, and it's a blessing in that. And
that's right.
I think we should embrace.
That's how children learn from their parents, also by seeing differences and having a base comparison to deal with every day.
Right. And so there isn't, it's not that a man is better than a woman or a woman is better than a man. It's that God has blessed men and women with different talents, different abilities, and different purposes in life, especially in the family unit.
I don't know how it got so distorted to move so far away, and I was there. You'd think I would know. We just kind of believed the system of advancing women back in the 70s, because we thought that they were being prejudiced against. They didn't have the same opportunities job-wise, and there were a few good reasons why feminism had its base.
Absolutely.
And I still believe in some of those, way back when.
Yeah.
I no longer believe that a lot of them had success today, because look how far it's gone. But like most good ideas, it gets morphed out of its better place into a worse place.
But you hit on a very interesting point here. You say you can't see how we drifted from that. And
Yeah.
my point of view is, in the book, that's what I'm pointing back to. It's like, when we start looking into ourselves and what we can get and how our version of right and wrong would be,
Right.
that's where things get muddled.
That's it.
If we follow God's way, then we all are on the same page.
Let's talk a little bit about the children honor and respect their parents and all authority. Missing today too.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's funny how the Bible says. I think it's the 5th commandment, to honor your mother and your father. And people don't typically quote the last part of that, which says, so that you, as the child, can have a long and prosperous life.
No, I never even heard of that.
Right. So if you
There
read that,
go.
you'll see. It's like that commandment is specifically told to the children for the children's benefit, not for the parents.
Does this it teaches parents to be accountable for the moral fiber of their children is crucial here, but the Bible.
Yeah, the Bible promotes that. The Bible says that fathers, you are responsible for your children's moral fiber. I mean, it doesn't use those exact words, but
The service to others is also missing today in today's kids. There's a lack of it. I guess an aspiration to do things that your parents want to in a general way, and it's always hard to gather a teenager and make them be responsible, but it seems to have carried on into young adulthood. I see an awful lot of kids in their early 20s that just don't seem to be attached anymore.
Yeah, a lot of that is cultural, right?
Yeah.
Because 500 years ago, when you were 12, your family was struggling, to survive, struggling to put food on the table. Everybody had a part to play, and everybody did their part. They learned early. There weren't these laws that you can't ride a horse until you're 16, or you have to wear a helmet.
Yeah.
It was basically as soon as you were able to be productive and add to the family value in the family economy, you were promoted to do that. Nowadays, it's with the technology and the way things are today, it's just not that way.
I'm going to keep this fire going. If I could just modify the subject a little bit, the Bible also teaches that adultery and God's love is wrong and should not be rewarded. I think you would agree with me that the culture has accepted a certain amount of that, and every day in the news somebody else is having an affair of some type, and no one seems to be treated.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, right? I don't know how to.
Oh yeah. I mean, I suffered from that myself. It's a terrible thing. In my opinion, there should absolutely be laws against adultery, and there should be laws and punishment for adultery. Not so much jail time or something like that, but there should be the punitive accountability should be in the courts, where if I cheat on my wife and we go to court, then that should be held against me, that I'm the one that broke the family up and I'm the one that ruined it.
And that's another good example of what doesn't work in a court either. They won't punish anybody for adultery.
Right. And I mean, if there was punishment, right, then...
Not that I'm looking, but not looking for the punishment angle to hurt somebody for something that they failed in, because I think people will occasionally fall off the moral...
Right, but what would this do? This would drastically reduce divorce because of adultery.
Yeah.
Because people wouldn't have they wouldn't be involved with adultery, and also if they knew they were going to lose everything, rather than just being able to walk away with half of everything that they may or may not have earned, then it's...
Here's another one, Dan. Here's another topic for you. It teaches also against false witness and accusation. So the Bible and God's love teaches against false witness and accusation.
Yeah. So, and that's, of all the things we're discussing here, that's the only thing that they actually do have a judicial law about.
Yeah.
Right, that you can't bear false witness. But I mean, let's think about it in the terms of divorce, right? How many times you go in, you hear people are falsely accused of beating their wives or hitting their wives or hitting their children,
Which is
or-
rampant right now, the false accusations. You can do
Right,
that in court,
right.
and you get away with making lies to the court, and not only survive it, you can benefit from it.
Right, right, yeah, and these are all
Hell of a
things-
message. Excuse me to use the bad word,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, right,
that's
right.
what it was.
And
Hell
these
of
are
a
all
message.
things that these are all things that promote fear rather than love, and promote destruction rather than a productive, close family unit.
When morality is relative, then so is justice. Could you share a little bit about that?
Right. So, if my version of right and wrong is different than your version of right and wrong, but I happen to be a judge, then who do you think is going to be able to define right or wrong? Right.
Judge.
But if we all point to God's version of right and wrong, then it's a lot more clear. Adultery, again, is a perfect example of that. I mean, if people pointed to adultery and said, look, where does God weigh in on this? He doesn't like that.
Yeah.
All right, so then we're going to say that's sin, and that's a crime, and that's at the very minimum going to restrict you from profiting from this divorce.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
I mean, that's where we are. And
Right.
I've always said from the beginning, I really didn't understand. It just made sense to me that we go to church if we wanted to be divorced, we go to counseling and we go to our church. Hopefully you'd have an agreed to religious agreement as to what church you would be going to. And that's where you got married in church. Why wouldn't you be, if you were going to separate, why
Right.
wouldn't you have them be the purveyor of your,
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's critical to bring in the moral aspects, even if you're going to be going through a divorce, because fairness is a real thing, and justice is a real thing. It's not something that should be relative. It's something that should be more absolute and more clear cut. And I think in a lot of hearts and minds of Americans, it is clear cut, and they see themselves at the bad end of injustice.
Well, living by God's version of love is dramatically different than what we do. I mean, day to day. So something that we could import and be definitely a part of our lives is have that type of understanding about what God's love is all about. And I think you did a great job explaining it. Final comment or two about the book that maybe I might have missed, but I covered all my notes. What would you like to say about your book that you think might be helpful to people who are in transition, maybe we're families in transition, and that might help us?
Well, I hope and pray that the book sheds light and inspires people to rethink about morality and God's version of love. If we all learn God's version of love and we use that as a husband and a father and a community member, then we'll all be better off, and humanity will move more in the direction I think God designed it to move to.
Well, we needed to have this conversation today, and we needed to have this on our program. Families in transition, as we are, we need to think about having more of a moral fiber, certainly in our relationship. And it's taught me something. I want to thank you very much for sharing these ideas with me. I was really kind of overwhelmed with
for the
this. I hope we can
opportunity.
do another show like this at some future time, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every week. Of course, we always accept opposing views. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.